All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So it is it's time for, and as soon as I get my mouth back, what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. And I am Dr. Cheryl Hall-Russell, joined by Mr. Jasiri X, who is a founder of One Hood Media, and Dr. Jamil Bey, who was with the UrbanKind Institute and coming out of his home in our temporary home in Barbados, that he appears every week to make us jealous about how warm he is. And how many inches of snow did we get today, Jasiri? It's got to be at least 3 out here. And Dr. Bey, you're not allowed to speak to that at all. We can't hear you.
9 because of the pandemic. And so you can get into the beaches between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. So that's a really small window. Oh,
okay. But we feel much better about this now.
Man, bro, look, I gotta go shovel my driveway. But no, right? I think like you had said, and then I think they're saying it's gonna be a bigger storm Wednesday evening. So yeah, so then we gotta try to navigate the store because we gotta go try to grab everything off the shelf. So yeah, it's we would rather be in Barbados.
You can come home. You can come home. Yeah, come 2 days before the next snow. So come on in because we know it's so beautiful that you don't want to miss this. Yeah, no. Okay.
I can do.
All right. So, some of you have joined us today because we're going to be talking about education. We titled this thing, fixing our schools. I don't know that we can fix our schools as they are now. It's kind of like talking about fixing the police. We're always dealing with really large systemic issues. And sometimes it's not a fix, it's a blow up. So we're going to have a series of folks over this next few months coming on as a full community talking about education and their ideas around innovation. This is not about beating up so much of what's already happening. It's about bringing in some fresh ideas. So we're going to jump into that a little bit later, but we want to start where we always do, which is talking about where we are with COVID-19. A lot of things underway right now. People are actually getting immunizations. And where are we, Dr. Bey? Hopeful?
Well, not. I don't know if it's the cold or what has going on up there. That the numbers in Allegheny County are going down. Just across the board.
Good.
Hospitalizations, serious cases. So that that's a positive thing. We wanted to flatten that while we get the vaccine numbers up, and so as more people are being vaccinated. One of the good things is that we will drag you if you don't show up, but when you do, we got to give you credit. The county health department and UPMC and some partners, they rolled out a strategy to overcome what was happening, the disproportionate numbers of our people getting the vaccine, and so they Homewood got 1,000 vaccines last week, the Hill District got 1,000. And they did it in a way that it was under the radar and that the vaccine hunters from the suburbs weren't able to come in and take all of the slots. And so by, just a grassroots effort with, this hint of urgency, we have 96 hours to get 1,000 people go, it worked.
And you can't, can I ask a question, Dr. Bey? There's no way, could they say like you have to have this zip code to get in? I would think like they can't do anything like that.
They were not doing that. So if you came, there were some people from Monroeville who came in and got, that's cool. They were our people. But right. As far as what the outreach was and what the engagement was specifically, it was under the radar, go through Dr. Gilliam. Big up to that sister. She holds it down, but organizing and helping to facilitate how to engage the community. So from the Homewood Children's Village, the Operation Better Block, Alma Illery, CEA, and Homewood, they came together, coordinated, made it happen, and then shared what they were doing. Hey, helping the Hill District, and the CDC, the CE, the groups in the Hill District coming together to make it happen. And, and now they're sharing for other neighborhoods. Get ready with these type of templates because as your neighborhood's called, you don't want to be rushing for everything. 1,000 people, you think about 1,000 seniors who are ready to go. Okay with the idea of a vaccination when, some of us are still hesitant to make that step and then having access to get to the facility. All of those things need to be coordinated, but, the sense of urgency, I think, helped because it wasn't like, okay, let's build this out and stretch this out. We have 96 hours to do it. go. And I think that strategy helped to make it happen. And, Dr. G, that sister still doesn't sleep. She's out, helping other communities now think about getting ready. Love that sister.
Excellent.
But, just good work being happening. I said, thanks to Dr. Bogan at the health department, Liz Miller at UPMC, the other folks at UPMC that made it happen.
So I got a question. Another follow-up question. I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, Dr. Russell.
Go ahead, brother.
Hey, matter of fact, while you're speaking, I'm gonna grab a glass of water.
Okay. Are we turning the corner? Because we looked at January, I think was I believe it was like the deadliest month in terms of COVID deaths. Are we turning the corner? If you're saying like, COVID in Allegheny County, deaths in Allegheny County are down across the board. Folks are getting vaccinated now. It's, I know it's, it's nice in Barbados, but we're hoping like we're going to move into spring, hopefully soon. I guess the groundhog saw something. I don't know if that means anything or not, but would we now like look at it like, hopefully we'll be able to go back outside again? Is this kind of a turning of the corner that we could at least maybe see some light at the end of the tunnel?
Definitely not turning the corner. Let's not use that language. But I think where we are is these are hopeful signs. One, what we don't have is an idiot in the presidential office spewing nonsense and hurting the process. So we remove that. Then we have an opportunity for sane conversation. So we remove the whole nonsense from the mass media public discourse. I mean, there's still some noise in social media, but at least you're not having to deflect what's coming out of the mouth of an idiot. Okay, so that's not happening. And now the cold weather, you know what? Thank goodness it froze your asses, because you Americans and your freedoms are your enemy. Because you're too free to think about other people and their safety and how that impacts you. And so that's working against you. So that cold weather, keep your ass home. Okay, that little nip in the butt, the snow, all of that, enforcing social distancing. And then when you're off, you better have a scarf around your face.
Except Sunday.
It's helping. It's slowing down, but vaccine, we're not where we need to be with the vaccines. No. And we're not where we need to be with, just everybody thinking about common sense safety.
But like you said, some hope.
Yeah, it's hopeful because we're going to get some traction here. This cold is going to help keep some butts home and slow down the curve of the spring.
Yeah, I think places just like you said, Dr. Russell, like Florida is just on some like it's whatever. They're also talking about it possibly being an all-star game in Atlanta, and I know there's been some pushback on that because, like you said, I mean, you had 25,000 people at the Super Bowl, but then also people showed pictures of just downtown Tampa Bay the day before, and it was just the streets packed full of people. And so, maybe we need to pray for some snow in Florida. I don't know.
14 days. I mean, post Super Bowl, everybody was posting all their parties. And I mean, I was looking at my timelines and they look like they always did on Super Bowl night. And so I'm like, oh, guys, we're not really quite there yet. There was, go ahead.
I was going to say, I had one more question for
he got two more answers. Go ahead and do it.
Man,
go ahead. I'll serve as the guest today.
And I guess this is kind of dovetailing on the school, but Mayor Peduto proposed vaccinating all of the public school teachers. Is that possible, feasible? Because I mean, just like you said, I mean, you're talking about a lot had to happen just to get like our community, people that desire vaccinations in our community. Is it feasible or possible to get all the teachers vaccinated? And I guess that would maybe then allow for in-person schooling. Is that something that we could do? Is there a timeline that would take place?
This is strategic. That's another question. Does it fit into the bigger strategy? Because you still got kids who are passing COVID among themselves and bringing it home to people like me as a mom. Go ahead.
But getting in on that, here's a part of it. If you go back to now that you need us to trust you, We don't have that because of your racist history, because of the way that you've treated and disrespected Black folks, brown folks throughout, because you don't have precautionary principles in the way that you think about chemical use. All of these things, you've created this space where now even there are a whole lot of us, our people who work in hospitals, who see it, who are like, no, not me, not yet. And so the idea of you can't mandate that teachers get the vaccine. And so there's still a whole lot of teachers who are like, I'm not going to be first. I'm waiting for the single dose. I'm waiting, let's wait and see. And so it's going to be, it's a good idea, but it's that trust building process, that trust building step is still important. And so, we're trying to get to the point, trust the science, understand, make the best decision for yourself. You've not heard me tell anybody, you go get the vaccine. I talked to my parents today. They're like, no, we're not ready. And I'm not trying to talk them into it. Do you understand all the information? Yes, they have a reason. They've explained why. Okay, that makes sense to you. I respect that. But, in your own time, obviously there's not enough trust in this system to get people to completely buy in. So you're not going to vaccinate all teachers because there's still a lot of hesitancy.
Right. Wow, it's a big decision. I mean, I just hope that he's talking to folks that are really a part of the whole bigger strategy. When you make statements like that, how is that fitting into what's already in place? So, I just didn't know if it was a political move or is this something that fit into the larger strategy of the state. Speaking of political moves, let's make a move into this education conversation. We've been talking education since, we shifted from just doing COVID back. Look, y'all, we're going to be on a year pretty soon here. But so many months ago, when we start talking about what Black Pittsburgh needs to know, education came into this conversation very early on. And often it came in as a negative. We're talking about education gaps. We're talking about, and then of course we start talking about it in the midst of COVID. So we already, massive chasms in education now start getting impacted by a pandemic. And so the stories have been pretty abysmal. Kids who were with special needs aren't being attended to, just one thing after another from, just clearly showing we were not ready for prime time. And this is not even dragging anybody. I don't know if anybody fully prepares for a pandemic and how it's going to impact education, but it did. But it also brought to light a lot of other conversations that we're having about the systems that we're using, the public school systems. And the other day there was a kind of a splash in the paper when Dan Lavelle and Reverend Burgess came out and declaring education was, in crisis. And I think it was their attempt to get this conversation going in a broader space and not, and I'm fine with that. Because it's not about the superintendent or just the school board trying to solve the issues. And so what we're going to be doing, hopefully once a month or close to it, is bringing in people to have conversations about what can be done about the educational system that will truly make changes instead of us just kind of continue to rearrange these chairs on the Titanic. We're not fixing them internally. How are we bringing in full communities in conversation to do that? So today, after that prelude, we wanted to bring in a few folks. Malcolm Thomas, who is the executive director of Reaching Back, is joining us for this conversation. We have Tammy Thompson, who is the executive director of Catapult. And she's going to tell us the difference between Catapult and what she was doing before with Circles. And we have Dr. Tracey Reed, who is a program officer at the Grable Foundation, whose educational background is education, who has been full-bodied and versed in fully into education from day one. Sounds like Tracey, looking at your background. And so we want to hear what you guys are thinking about where we are and some of the things we haven't tried that you think could work. So I'm not going to narrow you into any particular thing. I'm going to throw it to Tracey now and kind of let us know where you are on this.
Great. Thanks. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I guess I could start just by saying I'm a school head. I love school. I have, from the time I was the smallest person, I remember always wanting to be in school. The thing that I think as we approach what is going to happen when our kids go back to school, as we think about what about school needs to change. I am reminded of James Baldwin's words, where he said, teaching Black kids is a revolutionary act. And when we, lots of people would think, well, it doesn't take all that. But when you think about the fact that schools were not created for Black people, they have never served Black people en masse well. They have in fits and starts. That to actually teach Black kids is revolutionary. And we have to approach it in that way. We have to look at what is happening in classrooms, in districts, in school buildings, in states. And we have to look at the entire system. We have to look at what's happening in communities. And I focus specifically on Black communities. We have to look at what's happening in Black communities and how we can begin to rethink how we approach school. I've been reading the book Free to Learn. Thank you, Muffy Mendoza. I've been reading that book, and it just reminds me of what it means for kids to learn. And we have to get back to what is that very specific and special subject matter that kids need, and what are those systems that we need to put into place? What are the mechanisms by which we need to help kids to learn the very important work that they need, what they need to learn in order to just be free?
Yeah, that's a heck of a statement that teaching Black kids is revolutionary. Tammy, what does that mean when you hear that?
Man, I love it, right? Tracey and I talk a lot about this, because one of the main things that I focus on and what we focus on as an organization, we are very heavily invested in helping families escape poverty. And poverty, I think thinking about how poverty impacts people and how it impacts people emotionally and psychologically and all of the ways that it impacts people, I don't think that administrations, school administrations, educators, people who are making decisions about how poor Black children are being educated are considering the impact of long-term exposure to poverty and how it impacts learning. Not only how it impacts learning, but how it impacts the families and the adults in the household who are trying to hold everything together and still make decisions about their children's education. And that is a key component that I think is missing in how we plan for how Black children are educated, how we plan for how Black families are engaged in the education process. And so, as a parent, personally, and I really want to have this conversation from my own personal experiences, I've been parenting as part of the Pittsburgh public school system for 30 years, right? I parented my own children, my own 5 children in PPS, and I now am raising a granddaughter who is part of PPS. And what I'll tell you personally is I don't hold much hope for the improvement of the PPS system. I just don't. And that's part of my experience. And so what I'm focused on now is trying to think of alternatives, trying to think of, ways that we can create these environments where adults, parents of these children realize and recognize that they hold enough power to decide how their children are educated. And if you really think about it, we haven't really felt that kind of power as far as education. I'll tell you, as a parent, I never even really considered that there were options for how my children would be educated, because it's just a thing you just assume is a given. Well, this is the neighborhood that I live in, and this is the school that they go to because I live in this neighborhood. If I'm lucky enough to get my kids into a magnet program, great. But do parents even really know what that means? Have we even really explained what that magnet system means and all these options? And so I just feel like I want to focus more on helping parents recognize the power that they hold to make these decisions about their children's education. I just think that's really, really important, because I'm not going to sit here and bash the system, because the system is what it is, and people have to make their choices about what's best for them and their families. But
Agreed.
Me personally, 30 years, I think I've invested enough time to be able to make a decision about what's best for my children. And I just haven't seen anything that's telling me that I'm wrong.
So that detachment, I mean, I know that, folks walk in and they don't feel empowered in any kind of way. And it's like, this is what it is, that, even when they come in to kind of have conversations about what's going on with their own children, sometimes you don't even feel like you know your own kids well enough to advocate for them because of the way these structures are set up. And I'm in agreement with you. We're not about trying to drag it because we can't fix it, on the fly today, but we want to hear, what's going on. So Brother Malcolm over here, what are you hearing? I mean, what is it about it? Can we fix it? Are we blowing it up? What do you think we need to do with it?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier, and as a Pittsburgh public school parent, as a Pittsburgh public school graduate, as someone who has worked in the schools, I don't know this to be a fact, but I think possibly I may have worked in more schools than anyone that I know. I've worked in 19 different school buildings.
Wow.
And what I have found over the years is that certain things have persisted since as far back as we can remember. My wife is the project manager for equity for the district. And if you look back to the work that Dr. Sizemore and others were doing back in the 70s, you'll see that those same concerns are just as real. And the needle really hasn't moved with those things in multiple decades of really targeted work, or at least it would seem to be, to try to change those outcomes for all students and Black students in particular. So I think that what we have to do, going back to what was just being said, is, one of the things I like to tell the kids is that, I ask them to just look around a room. Everything in that room came from someone's mind. The school as we know it is a construct of other people's vision and other people's understanding of what education should look like. It's a really good book if you want to get it, just to show you on this. It's a book by a guy, it's called The Math Myth and Other STEM Delusions. And it talks about how the number one reason why people fail a high school class, fail in high school, or fail in college is because of a failed math class. And because the math curriculum that was constructed, it really puts you through a level of math that you never ever use in life, number one, and that is well above what would be required by even people who are mathematically inclined. They don't even use it themselves, the types of math that they learn in high school. It'd be like learning musical counterpoint, or certain theoretical things about English that, so that was someone's idea about math that was implemented centuries ago. And that we have continued to go forward. And his sister Halima was talking about, or Sister Tammy, as she's indicated on the screen. I call her Halima. But we always got two names, y'all. I call her
use them freely.
Yeah. So Sister Halima was talking about, as a parent, you start to think that, we do certain things because this is how it's always been done. But we have to understand that education, a lot of what we accept, particularly our people, is someone's idea of what this should be. And we've never questioned it because we've never been put in a position to really think about, like, I know more people. I was just talking to my sister about this about an hour ago. I know more people in the last 10 months who've gotten into investment. Why? Because people haven't been working.
Yeah.
So you have all these young people who are becoming millionaires, literally, because they're now looking at, I need to find ways to make money that isn't according to this standard construct that we've been told. You go somewhere, you punch this clock, you get paid. And people are like, well, what if that doesn't happen? And sometimes that's the best thing for us, to really think that what would happen if we had to rely on our own talent? The public school system and public education was really the outgrowth of Black people out of enslavement. We're the people who created that. So we can recreate something else, and I think that this is the time to start thinking about it, because I don't even want to blame anybody I just think that it's about, because I think part of activism is defined as, really critiquing people. Now, that's part of it. But I think I think we should do an 80-20 thing on that. That's my percentage. I'm doing 20% of my thing critiquing others and 80% of my meeting with people who want to start our own institutions. Me and Jamil, Dr. Bey have been talking about that now for how long, Doc? I mean,
34 years.
34 years of talking about institution building.
And you're only 41. You guys are bright.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's where some of the conversation has to go, is what kind of structures can we put in place? And it may not need to be a school right away, but what kind of things can we do? Because it's being put on us whether we realize it or not anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So let me jump in there, since you called me in on this, brother. What you're talking about, and this is sort of what Halima was talking about. I call her Halima too.
That's fine. I love it.
But what we're talking about, this is what the conversation that behind the scenes we had as we thought about, okay, this series is called What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know. And we started out talking about COVID, but there's a whole lot of other conversations. And what we wanted to do is, if we're really talking about the anti-racism and destroying these ideas of white supremacy, defining what it is, let's not use those things that emerge from that as the model. We were thinking about our children. What would we be thinking about? Let's not use this as the example. And, talking 34 years ago, brother, you and I, we had the same book, Bobby Wright's book. And that was you highlighted and I underlined that one passage. And it was, there's an inviolated principle across the animal kingdom that you did not send your offspring to your enemy and demanded that, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly, and demand that they be educated. That this system has continuously showed us that we're products for exploitation. We are tools in this. And yet we still keep thinking about, what do we need to do? But it must be us. How come our kids aren't driving? What are you not doing, son? How come you're not, when this is not, where does that happen?
And Dr. Bey, Dr. Bey,
get in on this.
I have to, because a lot of our parents were children at some point who were part of this system and are carrying, I'm one of them, who carried a ton of educational trauma. And that educational trauma does exactly what you just said. It makes you, it creates this inefficient, you feel deficient, right? You sit in front of these people and they tell you, well, little Johnny just can't learn. We're just having such a hard time. And we know our children. But the minute we sit in front of these people, for some reason, we lose all of our parental confidence. They have a way of making us feel like it's something that we have done or haven't done enough of that is causing these gaps in education, right? And I remember it being, I was a very young mother of 5 children. I worked at least 2 jobs almost the entire time. And there would be days where they would say, well, we need you to come to the school. Well, I can't come to the school because I got to work today, And when you can't make it, and this is the thing that I really focus heavily on, because I think somebody has to speak for these parents who are working their tails off to keep a roof over their head, keep food on the table, getting the kid off to school and being made to feel like garbage because they can't show up to tell a teacher how to educate their kid. I didn't go to school to be a teacher. I'm not an educator. I'm an educator in a different ilk, but I'm not that type of educator. And for you to make me feel like I'm inadequate as a parent because my child is having an issue learning in this environment, it's not right. But that is happening. And so parents are in these places being made to feel like I haven't done enough and I need to do more. When the reality is, a lot of times our children aren't being educated because they don't know how to educate our children. And that breaks my heart when I hear parents who come and they're defeated. They feel defeated because they don't know what else they can do to make
before Dr. Armand jumps in on this, let me get one more element of this educational trauma. So if you imagine, and we need more Black teachers. We need to see ourselves. We need people who care, but our kids do better with that. But when you think about, where do Black teachers come? They sit in the class and they watch this system mentally molest and rape our children, berate our children, and they sit there and, well, hey, I want to do that. That's not the experience that inspires people to lead and be teachers. Mm-hmm. And so, add that to the level of how this system continues to perpetuate itself, and it's not in our favor.
Mm-hmm. These people made my mama cry. I mean, that whole trauma of how terrible you feel. And thank you, Malcolm, for that book. I mean, I'm looking at a kid now who is bright as she wants to be, who's struggling with trigonometry. I can't help her. That ain't my thing. She'll never use it again. And I'm like having to ride her about at least pulling a C out of this trig class when, and we are both, the anxiety level in my house is so much higher than it needs to be about some foolishness around this because she's ready to go.
I had to ask somebody when I was in school, I said, what is trig? To my teacher. He said, well, it's science. I said, but wait. If I understood what it was and how it relates to anything in life, anywhere outside of this room, I might be able to understand it better. And no one could explain that to me.
The practicality of education. That's what we are talking about.
And I couldn't put it into context for anything I'd ever seen anywhere outside of that room in my life.
Right. So, I mean, Jasiri, what we're talking about and what we really wanted to get in on, and Dr. Reed, I want you to weigh in too, is the practical aspects of this. And we keep talking about what's not practical. We keep talking about this literal PTSD, and I don't think we're using it lightly for our children and our parents who are engaged in the public school systems. We come out survivors, not necessarily thrivers. And, what do we change about this? Or what are the aspects of this that just need to be snatched out and replaced that changes that dynamic?
Well, I think it goes to actually what Brother Malcolm just said about like do you see yourself inside of what's being taught? And I'll say, my last job before, I became a full-time artist, I worked for Pittsburgh Public Schools. I worked, I was what was called a teen parent advocate. I worked with teen fathers. In fact, my brother Malcolm was there the day, the day I left and quit. And, I was forced out. I'm gonna tell the story too, y'all. I was really forced out because of politics, because the type of music that I was making was of a political nature. It wasn't every job performance that I ever got was always high reviews, super high reviews. But I was pushed out because of my politics. And I remember, my mentor, but I had some dope mentors. I talked to one of my mentors, Melvin L. yesterday. You know what I'm saying? I considered you a mentor, our brother Malcolm. I consider, of course, our brother, Dr. May he rest in power, Dr. Dawood Akbar, was somebody that just were individuals that but they gave the students, they made the experience relatable. And I think I remember One Hood started because I had to wear a suit. I don't know if I ever told y'all this. I had to wear a suit when I worked in the school system, or else I would be mistaken for a student. And if I didn't wear a suit and would go to try to pull a student out of class, teachers would hit me with all these questions. When I had a suit on, I never had any problems. So then I was the black guy in the suit, and they would say, hey, can you talk to these bad students? And the bad students were all our black male students. And when I would get them in a room, and we would have conversations about what was relatable to them. I would talk about hip hop. I would talk about these things that I saw in the news. And I remember teachers coming in and saying what are you doing? How are they quiet when you're talking to them? How are they respectful when you're talking to them? And it was well, I'm treating them. I'm coming in and treating them with respect from the beginning. But we're also talking about things that they can relate to and experiences that they personally can relate to. And so I think that that's part of what's missing in a lot of these conversations is just like you said, Stu, we don't discuss money. How money works, how credit works. We don't talk about these things in school. But here are a group of students that know how important money is to their lives. Right. And they go through 12 years of school, and we never get a chance we don't even talk about it. And so I think part of what we have to do. So when we started One Hood, I said I didn't want to be inside of a school, because I knew, for instance, I had a hip hop club at Alderdice and Carrick, and the first thing they said was, "Oh, you can't have this. There's profanity. You all are using profanity." And I'm thinking, well, do you walk the classrooms? These are high school. What do you mean? what are you talking about? But there was kind of like this thing. I can't even play a uncensored song that these students are listening to all day long inside of the school system because these antiquated rules and antiquated thinking. You know what I'm saying? And so we took One Hood Media out of the schools and we started to, build these things to kind of empower our students, of course, around hip hop, art, and culture and media. But I think that that's how we have to start, like with the eye on building our own schools. But what we can do is say, what places and institutions do we have right now where we can send our students that are building culture? I know Community Empowerment does some great stuff. I know there are different organizations. UrbanKind does some great stuff that we can say, okay, who is working with our students kind of beyond what that current school construct is. And then maybe we can come together under the guise of what you all talked about and put our resources together and say, well, what can we do? Maybe we can do once a day. Maybe we can do something where we begin to look at our own institution, our own way of kind of maneuvering and really giving our students the tools necessary to actually survive.
Can I tell a quick story real quick? Just as a 30-second, Doc. I was with Jasiri, and we were prohibited from doing groups together with Oliver. We were told we could not meet with the boys together at any time. That's number one.
Wait a minute, the two black men could not meet with other black children.
We couldn't meet with the black children together. We could not bring our group, because we were trying to bring our groups together to meet with the brothers, to bring them together. Anyway, so we're standing in the copy room, and he said, "Hey, bro, I'm just letting you know this is my last day." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm doing my music thing. I'm going out on it full time." And then just as he was saying that, I guess it's the woman, I don't know if it's the supervisor, whoever she was, she walked in. She said, "Mr. Smith, I want to talk to you about," he said, "Hold on, wait a minute. Before you start that," and he stuck out the keys. And she said, "What is this?" He said, "Listen, I'm resigning." And she said, "Well, you can't." He said, "Wait, here's the keys. I'm resigning as of right now." And he walked out, and we were both standing there, and he left. And the next thing I knew, I saw Welcome to America's Most. I saw his video on YouTube. It was like a month and a half later, and that was it. He walked right out of the building, and he handed her the keys, and he left. And I was like, it was the most gangster thing I ever saw in my life. I was just like, wow, I can't believe I felt like I was part of history. He left the building, and she was just standing there with her mouth open for like 30 seconds. But I just wanted to share that and just jump back out.
We needed that vision. All right, Dr. Reed.
I would like to share one of the I'm one of the people for whom school always worked. I was a compliant, soft-spoken girl. My parents were active in school. They brought cupcakes, and my dad went all to all the sporting events, etc. So school always worked for me. It always made sense for me. And so when I got to the place where I was teaching high school, one of the students that I had the most trouble with was a young man. He was a drug dealer. His name was Jerome. He would come to class and he would either sleep or he would there were times that he participated in class. But if we were doing anything that required some he had to read, I taught English. If he had to read a chapter before we came, he just didn't participate. And so the bright young 22-year-old, I was like, I'm going to call Jerome's mother. So I called his mom and I said, this is what he does in class. This is He was 17, taking 11th grade English and 12th grade English so he could graduate. So, we have this conversation, and I said to her, when we're talking about sort of the context of literature, he is right there. He knows history, he knows politics, he knows those things very well. He's really articulate about them. When we're talking about the substance of a novel, he doesn't have anything to contribute. And she said, will you repeat what you just said? And I said, well, when we're having these conversations, he contributes. He's brilliant when it comes to history and politics. And she said, that is the first time a teacher has ever said that my kid was good at anything. This child was in the 11th grade. And I was dumbstruck because the kid was brilliant. He just was he just knew how to get under my skin. a brilliant kid. And so I said to her, you know, so we go on with the conversation, and she said, so what do you want me to do about this? And I had to sit and think for a second. And because in my house, when I didn't do something right, my parents would take this away, or I wasn't allowed to go to this place. This was an 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid who made all of his own money. She said his television is his. I can't take it away. His car is his. I can't take it away. He pays bills in this house. Like, what do you want me to do? And so the first time I was really struck with the idea that families don't all work the same. And so you have to think about you have to think in context about what is going to work for this kid. And so one of the things that we talked about was that she would just show up at school when he would act crazy in my class. She would show up at school, and he hated that. And so when he put his head down to sleep, or he'd say something out of turn, I'd say, Jerome, want me to call your mom? And he would straighten up. But the thing that it really taught was that we're not all, you know, I go to school because I love school and it's, you know, great, but that's not everyone's experience. And so as we're thinking about what those experiences are, we have to really understand the context in which young people are being schooled. So, and the other thing, I think, when Tammy, when you were talking, the thing that just strikes me about what happens in schools with kids who are poor, kids who live in poverty, kids who come from chaotic circumstances, is that everyone expects them to act like that's not the case. Like everyone expects them to come to school and act like middle class kids do. Like that's just the standard of behavior. And there's no recognition that if you are not middle class, you do not behave like a middle class child does. And if you did, that's like mental illness. Like it doesn't make sense to go to a place and behave as something you're not. We expect Black kids to act like they're white. We expect poor kids to act like they're middle class. We expect, and all of that is nonsense. And it does exactly what you were saying, Tammy. It makes you feel like you're deficient.
That's right. And let me add this. We also expect parents who are in survival mode to act as they're thriving. And there is a big difference between a person who is in survival mode versus a person who has all of their basic needs met and are thriving. They make decisions differently. They respond to criticism differently. They respond to circumstances differently, and they recognize opportunity differently. So, you know, somebody's saying, well, I just really need you to, you know, have this conversation. We want to test little, you know, Sandy. We want to test her to see, like, what I'm hearing you say is there's something wrong with my kid. You're telling me there's something wrong with my child. There's something wrong with the way I'm parenting. What you're doing is bringing to the surface all of the stuff that I already feel about myself. That's already just hovering in my subconscious. And now and this is why a lot of educators get the response that they get from parents who are, literally just holding on. I've been listening to somebody in a job that I hate telling me that I'm, you know, talking to me crazy all day. I might be in a relationship where somebody's talking to me crazy all day. I might live next to a neighbor who's talking crazy every day. And now I'm talking to this teacher who is just happening to catch the wrath of all of the stuff that's on my shoulders. And listen, this idea that poor Black families don't care about education, you know, if they cared a little bit more, if they just did a little bit more, like, I cannot take that. And I can't take it, because if people just had a clue to what some of these parents are enduring, and even pre-COVID, it was already hard for parents pre-COVID. Now you add trying to survive in a pandemic on top of that. And now you want me to be, now I'm responsible for my child. That is too much for most parents to bear. It's too much. Granted, it still has to get done because our children still have to be educated. But I just need people to think from a more empathetic place about what is really going on in a lot of these households, and stop blaming the victims of a system that was created to destroy them.
I don't know.
Yes.
I taught in
Yes.
a doctoral program. So I was teaching, principals or folks who wanted to be superintendents. And what I learned in that program, which kind of shocked me, is that we teach innovate. We teach them not to be innovative.
Yeah.
The entire time I was there and I was listening and I was like, what are your dissertation ideas? I was all ready to get into this. And they were very structured in, how long to keep a kid in school, being late, looking at absences, there was all this stuff around the system that they wanted to study, but none of it was innovative. And I'm sorry if you were a student of mine, I do apologize, because I'm not blaming you. What you've been told is you got to teach to test. You've got to, if you're not measuring up with certain test scores every year, these are the bonuses that you're not going to get if you don't do it. I mean, there's this whole massive system that is around these very narrow outputs. And now we're sitting here talking about working outside of that. When they are being put into a mill right now, both as undergraduate and graduate educators, of this very non-innovative design of delivering education. That's what we're fighting against.
Yeah.
This their ideas of success. And then when it's not happening, that's when the parent gets called in, and I've been in many of those rooms and like Tammy, we were saying, I mean, I had a teacher, I went in for a 1-person meeting. There were 10 people in the room and they were all telling me what my child had done wrong. And I turned all the papers over and I said, now we're going to redo this room in reverse order. And y'all going to tell me what she's done right.
Yeah.
And there was this look of shock, like, what? Well, of course she does this, and this. Then I said, don't you do this to another parent? Because what you tried to do was like a gang attack.
That's right.
And I felt violated because I know I sent you a really pretty great kid and, you're telling me this. But again, they are narrowed in, right? So these are the outcomes. And so what we're trying to talk about now is how do we bust that up for lack of a better term.
If there's one thing I want to say, and I really want to open this up to all of you all, because I really feel like, Dr. Bey is as much part of this panel as well as you, Dr. Cheryl Hall-Russell. Part of what I see, and this is a conversation I've been having lately, because folks are talking about dismantling, and when I say and strictly talking about dismantling racism, dismantling white supremacy. And one of the conversations that I've been having is like, particularly as Black people and people of color, we're taught to navigate white supremacy and racism. And oftentimes we're successful in this system because we learn to navigate white supremacy and racism. I kind of, I have a similar experience to you, Dr. Reed. My mother, was, somebody that like education was taught so strongly in my house. I really felt like I had no choice. Like my mom wasn't accepting those C's. Like she was so involved, but my mom also, graduated valedictorian of her college. Her university, was a nuclear engineer. So it was a certain thing, but that's not everybody's experience. You know what I'm saying? So, but I think like I would, what I've been telling people is when it comes to dismantling white supremacy and racism, that's a different construct, because you're not, one of the things, first things we did at One Hood, we said, we're not censoring anybody. Speak how you feel. And a lot of times, like you said, what school forces you to be in this box, and like the students that can like squeeze themselves into that box of what is expected, how you're expected to act, how you're expected to behave. And, I remember when I first got to Carrick, and the Carrick was the first school I went to, and I was shocked at how racist, like overtly racist, the high school was to Black students. I was like, what the hell? And I would kind of tell the students, like, you have to use game. This is what I would tell them straight up. Like, you got to use game on these people, because I saw like VPs say things intentionally to get a rise out of students. And then when the students would buck, they would just suspend them and get them out of there. And so it's like, well, should we be teaching our students to be something other than who they really are? So it puts you in a scenario where you end up teaching your student to succeed in this society, you have to fit into this acceptable box. And if you go out of that acceptable box, right, then you won't succeed. And I feel like part of what we need to do is like, no, we should be creating environments where people are comfortable being their full selves, like their full authentic selves. Then we can find out what it is that you're passionate about, love to do. And that could be the thing that you contribute to this society. But oftentimes in that, like, so how do we get from, like teaching students to navigate racism and white supremacy to actually teaching our kids to dismantle, and even white students as well, to dismantle racism and white supremacy? How do we get to that part?
I think we're not really teaching. That's not a thing we can teach kids to do. That's a thing that we need to require adults to do. Like we need to require adults to be markedly different in school settings than they are right now. And that may seem highly critical, but we do need to require adults to be very different. I'm sorry, Malcolm, I interrupted you.
No. I agree with you, and I'm glad you jumped in. I just, I remember, I hate to use this, it seems like such a cliche analogy, but I remember when I went to Sterrett and Sunnyside, and I was very close with some of my friends who were Jewish, and I would go to the bat mitzvahs and the bar mitzvahs. And one of the things that always struck me was when we were going to hoop after school, they would be going to Hebrew school after school. And I still remember this vividly. And I'd be like, what you doing after school, man? He's like, we got Hebrew school on these particular days of the week. And we would be going to hoop. And I was like, man, I'm so glad I didn't got to go to Hebrew school, so I can just go out and play basketball. That was my thinking. But what I realized is that when you see people who have cultivated an idea that you create the world and are sovereign people in the world, one of the things that you develop in them is a sense of group identity. And when you have that, so for me, even when I was lost, that was so inculcated in me as a child. My mother would have the Black Panther books at my house when I was little. And if someone bought us a white toy, she would paint the faces brown. That's how serious I remember somebody bought me an ABC thing when I was little, and it was all white faces. She bought brown paint and painted all different colors of brown of every single face from A to Z, because she didn't want that on my wall. She didn't want to disrespect the person because it was a family member. So she painted them all brown. So by the time I was able to acquire some sense of my skills, because if you have skills with no identity, you will always use your skills in a way that is abusive to yourself and others, right? It's like you might have a communication skill, but you'll become a pimp, or you'll go and use it on women. But if you understand that this is who I am, and there's a sense of collective identity that has been cultivated in me, then once I get something, and by the way, I want to say you can go through 12 years of education and still not even know what you're good at in the school system. Meaning, I'm at Oliver High School, and I tell the story all the time. And I said, hey, brothers, how many people know what they want to do? And every hand went up. And every comment was going to the league or getting into music. And I'm like, all right, cool. What league? They said, either one, Mr. Malk, NFL, NBA, either one. I said, okay, great. How many guys tried out for the team? Every hand but 3 went down. So what were they saying? They have no idea what they want to do in life. They have not been taught that they're better at anything than playing a sport that they haven't even had the confidence to try out for in high school. So that means that your child can graduate in 12th grade and not have any idea what their skills are, what they're talented at. So I believe that when you have this group sense of identity and the sense of what your range is and the sense of confidence and where your where your talents are supposed to go to build up your community. Dr. Carter G. Woodson always talks about how he says an education is useless if it doesn't revolutionize the social order. That was a comment he made, the second graduate from Harvard, by the way. So if we're not teaching our children that what they learn and what they acquire is not for improving the place that they came from, we'll never have a real turnaround anyway, because I don't believe that the people who are controlled really know how to solve the problem. I don't believe it's always an act of political will. I believe that there's an act of political will where certain people don't want to change it. But I believe that there are some genuinely sincere people who work like dogs in the school system who don't know what to do.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
I know some amazing people that work in the district. I know some amazing educators
Yep.
who are giving everything they have. But again, I just feel very strongly that a system, to use the series word, it's an antiquated system that does not work. It doesn't work in this day and age, and it doesn't work for this specific group of people. And I don't know. I'm tired. So I'm old. I'm tired. I don't have the energy left to continue to give to a system that I don't believe in. So I think I love that there are people who are still invested in trying to improve it and create it and do all of these things. But for me, I have to focus on trying to work with folks who are interested in finding supplements, at the very least, finding supplements to a system that doesn't work. I love the thought of, creating these spaces outside of the school system where it's focused not just on the students, because that is important, but the parents have to be engaged in this as well. Because, and then think about, how often do we ask our children what they want to learn? Mm-hmm. Tracey and I had this conversation last week. How often do we say, well, what do you want to learn? I don't know any adult ever asked me that as a child. This is what was on the syllabus. This was the list. This was it. And nobody ever asked me what. And so then when I got to higher education, and there was a thing called electives, really choose. Because I get to choose something. I don't even know what to choose because I don't know what it's like. So do we ask our kids what they want to learn? Are we even giving them an environment where they can say, I don't like your daughter, Cheryl, what kid wants to learn? Like, I have no idea what it is.
But what she did do when she got an elective of psychology and went, oh my God, this is amazing. I like psych. But then folks will say, well, what are you going to do with that? How are you really going to learn it? Are you going to make a living as a psych? And you're like, kids should just have a good time and enjoy something that she loves. And maybe she turns this into something. But we do have these parameters. I mean, what we've said so far is that, establishing a group identity is so important. What Brother Malcolm was saying, that we have to work toward that. Encouraging and rewarding teachers who are innovators. I mean, how do we change the system enough that I talk to very innovative teachers who are afraid to or are on the, have to kind of go outside of the normal classrooms to innovate in the way they want to, because it's not checking a box. And so we lock up really bright, happy, folks ready to jump into education. And within 2 years, they're like, I can't do what I talked about in school because that's not acceptable. So that's also
a piece. There's also a piece where, like, because this is one of the things that, our director of operations at One Hood, Farooq Al-Said, he worked at a school, and it was like, okay, because he has a background in martial arts, he became like the designated fight breaker upper. It's like, this is my job. You know what I'm saying? Like, my job is to teach. So there's also sometimes to be pressured. You're the black teacher. Like, so, when I went to Gateway, we have one black teacher. So he becomes not only the black teacher, he becomes the counselor, the person we go to with issues. And so you also have that situation where you have teachers, because they actually care, where now they're not just doing their classroom jobs. They like holding on to these kids. They meeting with the students after school. Like, so then they end up doing like heavy emotional labor that they don't even get paid for.
Yeah.
And in every field,
you have to be able to be a coach if you're a black teacher. But look, this conversation has to continue. I have to jump off for some stuff that I just can't avoid. This is a powerful conversation. As we move this forward with the next education, we're going to make this a regular feature, at least once a month. I mean, our children are our most precious resource. And as we're thinking about that, we're not focusing on fixing broke systems. Our vision is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What's the vision of thriving that we have for our children? And how do we get there? Whatever we're doing, whatever those systems are doing, that's behind us. We're going to succeed in spite of that.
That's right.
So that's the conversation. That's the vision. Those are the people who we're going to be engaging over the next several months on this conversation. Y'all keep talking. I got to jump out. Love y'all. Brother Malcolm, I had so many stories to share, but we just didn't have the time. But Brother Malcolm and I, for 34 years, in the Chambers building up at Penn State doing diagrams of reaching children and education and theory. We were on it. I'm glad that this brother is still my brother.
Yeah,
I appreciate you, bro. Thank you, man.
All right, see you, Dr. Bey.
Bye.
So, I love that the vision of thriving that we have for our kids. What is that, and how do we, Jasiri, you're talking about kind of having to work outside the system. So what I'm hearing is we're talking about maybe working outside in instead of inside out, because inside out hasn't worked well for us. So it sounds like the development of programs, not that, because we have all types of outside programs that really mimic what's going on the inside. What we're looking at something that doesn't mimic it, but brings something different that they are able to engage in and feel good about themselves.
But I also think we do have to be involved. And I think that's what's powerful about, Black Women for a Better Education and some of these other groups, because like you said, I think I was reading that the school has, I think, a $39 million deficit. It was part of the reason that they tabled the closing of the schools was because of all the community pushback that people gave on it. And so I think, just like you said, we have to have that. It can't be a one or the other. It has to be a both and, because our taxpayer dollars are still there. We have most parents have to send their children currently to a Pittsburgh public school. And so we do have to be involved. But like you said, part of it is beginning to develop and create our own systems, but we still have to keep our eye on what's going on over here and make sure, pushing for, police out of Pittsburgh public schools, all of these things that we want, because there's a school board race coming up. You know what I'm saying? And
we are very much going to be in it.
I'd be right. And I'm definitely looking at it. I'm looking at, like I said, some of these votes that I think feel like maybe weren't in the best interest of our students and our children. And, maybe we need, some community folks and folks that have shown that they really care for our community to be on that school board. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we need those fresh ideas at the board level and kind of what we're talking about doing outside as well.
Talk to us, Tammy, a little bit, both you and Dr. Reed, about Black Women for a Better Education and some of the focus of that work, because all three of us are involved in that.
Yeah, I love them. I love that group. I love the passion that they bring to, and I love a focus on Black children, right? I feel like sometimes in the city, we need to feel bad if we're focusing on Black folks. Like, it's so awful if we're just focused on Black folks. I'm sorry, that's my focus right now. I'm a Black woman, Black children, and Black grandchildren, and that has to be my primary focus, because I've seen what happens when we aren't being specific about that focus. And so I love that they saw a need and they stepped up and they said, listen, we've got to get involved. We've got to use our voices. We've got to use the power that we hold as Black women to address these issues that are impacting our Black children. And I am here for them. I'm here for anything that they're doing. I'm here for.
Me too.
We need them. We need their voices. We need their passion. We need their understanding of what Black families are needing and lacking in the system.
Yeah, it's one of the first times I've been engaged at that level of conversation. Go ahead, Dr. Reed.
The thing that I love about Black Women for Better Education is that it's sort of like, it doesn't matter who you are. If you are working against a great education for Black kids, then you are the target, right? So it's not like, we don't discriminate, right? We are very focused on what is best for Black kids. And the other thing is that this group of women, they walk that walk and they talk that talk, right? Yes. They don't skimp on anything. So when we have discussions, we have deep discussions about what our school budget is. We have deep discussions about what it means to run for school board. We have deep discussions about what our outcomes in Pittsburgh public schools look like. And there's no superficiality. There's no skimming. We're just going to talk about what's easy to talk about. We talk about the stuff that's hard to talk about, that impacts Black kids every day when they go to school, and we push back against some of the sort of preconceived notions, all the myths that surround what's happening in schools. We talked about the closing of schools, and right now we have a school district that could house 40,000 kids, and we've got 20,000. Like something that it's that large, that the discrepancy is that large. So what do you do when you have enough schools that could, you're down 15, 20,000 kids with the number of seats in schools, the school space that you have. So we talk about that. That's not popular. It's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to stand as Black women and say that a Black man is not doing what we believe he should do on behalf of Black children. That's not an easy place to be, but that has to be said, and it has to be said out loud, in our opinion. And so that's what we do.
And that was interesting because of the pushback, even in the Black community, when Black women got up and got pretty direct about what they wanted to see for Black children in Black schools. It was like, how dare you question a system? And we were like, how dare you not question the system?
Exactly. Because we're the
can't sit and kind of and watch it go by. So, I mean, my goodness, this conversation is so rich. But I know we're at our little over our 3-minute, 1 hour mark. And so what I do want to ask is what's next? I mean, what we said at the top of the show was we want to bring in community voices. We want to bring in parents. We want to bring in educators. We want PPS to free some of their people to allow them to talk to us as well, because we're not about attacking you, but we want to know what your teachers, the system doesn't even allow them to come and feel safe talking about educating Black children because they fear retribution. Free your peoples and let them come, because we need their voices in this as well. We need everybody's voice here. So Malcolm, I mean, what's next in this conversation that is going to move from us feeling really great about what happened today to moving more toward some of the visions that we're having right now?
Well, I learned this from H. Rap Brown years ago, hearing him talk on Donahue. And I think one of the things we have to do is remember that we're not starting from zero. There are people on this call. There are people listening to this thread. There are people on this panel who are working on this issue every single day. There are initiatives that are underway. There are people who are starting schools. There are people who are doing learning hubs in various communities. There are people who are seeking ways to get funding to help other people become incubators for other nonprofits. And so I think what we have to do is first understand, at least for me, that no one's coming to save us. That's the first thing I had to accept as gospel. That no one's going to climb into my mind or my circumstance. That that God is here, and so we have the ability through our own. And I'm not trying to invoke religion or anything, but I'm just saying honestly, we have the divine mandate to go out and to take this by the horns and do something about it ourselves. And that people have already been doing this. The question then becomes, how do we partner with each other? And I want to give a shout out to you, Doc, to you, Jasiri, and UrbanKind Institute for having this forum, because what it allows us to do is to connect with other people and to understand that we have of like mind, of kindred spirit, who want to see something. And so now those kind of partnerships are being formed. So that's already happening. It's just a question of how we do more of that.
That's right.
And how we prioritize our time. I'm on the back end of my life. So I realized that, I want to spend more of my time building something as opposed to just critiquing something. I think Jasiri said it. We have to do both. We never can stop. As long as our people are over here, we have to talk about what's happening wherever we are. But we have to, because an example is worth 1,000,000 words to me. So when you have your own thing to build from, then, and I wish I could read this quote to you from Emerson. It's one of my quotes I read all the time. I just want to read this one part, and I don't want to say anything else. Just listen to this for 1 second. This is the last thing I have to say. It says, in dealing with the state, we ought to remember that its institutions are not aboriginal. Though they existed before we were born, they are not superior to the citizen. That every one of them was once the act of a single person. Every law and usage was once a man's expedient need to meet a particular case. Society is an illusion to the young citizen. It lies before him in rigid repose with certain names, men, institutions, rooted like oak trees in the center, around which all arrange themselves as best they can. But to the old statesmen, they know that society is fluid, that there are no such roots and centers, but any particle may suddenly become the center of the movement and compel the system to gyrate round it, as every person of strong will does for a time, and every person of truth does forever. So I just wanted to leave that with you, because any one of us, and some of us can be that particle to gyrate around which things gyrate if we're just serious enough about it, and that's already happening. So I say salute.
Oh, thank you for that, Brother Malcolm.
I don't know how we end that better. that was an amazing quote.
That was beautiful. If you don't mind, can I just I do need to speak really, really quickly to the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative. It's part of an initiative that organization is part of with A+ schools and several other great organizations. But there's a parent hotline that I want parents to understand is available to them, and handling all types of calls. And some of the calls that we're getting right now are specific to truancy, believe it or not, that parents are being, cases are being filed for truancy for parents who, like right now in this pandemic, which just blows my mind. But for parents who need assistance navigating that right now and need help trying to figure out what to do or need some support in that space, please reach out to the hotline. I just want to give the phone number really quick. It's 412-256-8536. And, you know, we've been helping with a lot of stuff over the last almost year now. Parents who need help with, you know, getting laptops or internet or any kind of supports that parents are needing right now to try to navigate this, you know, learning from home situation. But at the top of the list right now are parents who are dealing with truancy filings. So we really want to support families through that. Yeah, I know.
Struggling to get my head around that right now, but that's where we are.
Yeah,
we'll put that number in the chat. I also want to say to the folks in the chat, thank you. You're a part of this whole conversation. We will go back and scroll this and look at some of the questions that you're answering, the statements that you're making, and we're adding all of that into our conversations and our thoughts. So please don't stop. Don't think we're not looking, but you know, I just want you to know that we appreciate it and thank you for doing that. Dr. Reed, any final statements on you know, where we are and where we should be going from now? I loved what Malcolm said about, you know, we're already out here. A lot of folks are already doing a lot of this. What's next?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just think that we have to get laser focused on what it looks like for Black kids to learn at high levels. We need to be unapologetic about making demands that they are in an environment where they're not. I mean, love is great, but I think in lots of situations there's a confusion between love and pity, and we have to make sure that people are loving our kids enough to hold them to high expectations. They're loving our kids enough to hold them to high expectations, right? They're loving them enough to just allow them to do hard intellectual work. Like that's what they should be doing. And that leads to freedom. And that is the only thing that does. And so that's, you know, I just leave it there, that just, we have to stop. We have to stop settling for what we've always known, and we have to stop settling for what is comfortable, and not just what's comfortable to us, but what's comfortable to middle-class white women who are in classrooms teaching our kids.
Yes.
True. I did just want to highlight this comment, Dr. Russell, because it said, you know, this is Mary Lau. My daughter has no children and is homeschooling all the children in her neighborhood while this COVID is going on. No one's paying her. So I just wanted to say to your daughter, like, thank you. As a parent that has 2 children that's doing online learning, and, you know, it's me and my wife, it's hard. It's very, very difficult. So, you know, folks volunteering, stepping up, doing it, you know, out of the kindness of their heart. I appreciate you. I also saw a comment where somebody was saying, like, they were calling, why hasn't your children been in school? And they like actually had COVID. They were like,
wow.
Did you hear me say I have COVID? And so, like you said, I mean, I think we have to have some common sense things we have to also, I feel like part of what white supremacy does also, it makes us think that just because a person has a degree that makes them more capable somehow of teaching our children. Like the degree, I remember being in a classroom with this guy had literally 4 degrees. Some dudes came in from Milwaukee called the Poets, and these children were crying. I mean, they were so connected with these young dudes, and this guy with 4 degrees couldn't even control the class. And so I think we also have to dismiss that thinking that the degree equals, not saying you shouldn't educate yourself, but that the degree equals like some type of that makes you a qualified teacher. And then I think, like you said, I like the idea of us connecting, the parent collaborative, the groups that are popping up. We got to come together. And the last thing I'll say is, it has to be something we're consistent at. One of the things that one of the school board members said was like, oh, people only talk about it when it's bad. And I kind of had to say, he probably right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I felt
but
like,
it's been bad.
Okay. I mean, oh yeah, true. But it was just a challenge to myself to be more consistent. So I like the idea of like doing a conversation once a month. Our PR director actually suggested maybe bringing some public school students, alumni on for a conversation as well. I thought that would be a dope idea. So we're going to continue having this discussion. This was crazy. I mean, you all are such a brilliant group.
Oh my gosh.
And you all also have like the voices, the podcast voices. So I would encourage, I don't know what y'all are doing, but I would encourage
I got this
y'all.
Yeti mic, that's all.
We have a platform. We have a platform. If you all are interested in having a conversation around education, whether I asked you, Tammy, to think about having these conversations, because we do have a platform to do that regularly. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I know folks are already busy, but holla if y'all want to. Absolutely.
I also just want to apologize for my background. Somebody just texted me and said, "What's up with your background, bro?" I apologize. I'm in the basement, y'all. My kids didn't have school today. Please forgive me. I want to give a shout out to Cheyenne, my program manager, for keeping it going. But I'm sorry. I'll change the background next time.
We do not care for all the wisdom that you brought. We can stand looking at your rafters. It's all good. It is all good. I do want to thank you guys. My goodness, what was brought here today was brilliant. I knew it would be. I know every time we bring together other members of the community who are as passionate about education as you are, it's going to continue to be brilliant. It's when we start to weave all this together that we break out, that we find a path out for our kids that is viable and it makes them whole. And I think that's what we all want is whole kids at the end who don't feel that they are being judged by the least. If my daughter is judged by her trigonometry, she in trouble. But what she is a whole kid that's extremely talented, like your children are. And that's what we need to be fighting for is the end of this educational path from that K to 12, that we got whole kids that are ready to come out and feel good about who they are. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing this wisdom. We are going to start to kind of write these ideas down and try to see how we make these connections, because that's what makes this show powerful, is that, we give an opportunity for all these voices and fabulous ideas. PPS, don't be afraid of us. Please free your people. Superintendent, let's talk to you. I'm not mad at you, but if you have all these folks around you that want to help as well. And so, you're going to be around for a few more years. We'd rather be a part of moving toward a solution than not. So we got a big tent wide open right now for anybody that really wants to be a part of this. So I'm going to let you go. I know we're past our time, but thanks so much. We will be back next Tuesday at 2.
Thank you. Bless y'all. Love
you. Yeah, take care of you.
Bye.
I got my first COVID vaccine.
Oh, you did? Yay!
Good for you. Good, Tammy.
I'm excited. People get vaccinated. My people, I love y'all.
Love you all. Peace.